Good day. My name is Fallon Philip Adams. My topic is defense mechanisms, and I chose this topic because I have observed these patterns within myself and others. Anytime I'm faced with challenging situations, it just feels like I'm repeating a cycle instead of actually overcoming it. And I hope that everyone who looks at this presentation is able to identify these patterns in themselves and also understand what it means when they observe it in others. Enjoy.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this episode of PsychLab, where we find out what happens up here. I'm your host, Treverson, and tonight on PsychLab, we're going to learn on a special topic called defense mechanisms. And to help us with this, I have with me special guest Fallon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, Fallon, let's get straight into it. So, defense mechanisms. What are defense mechanisms?
Okay, excellent question. So, before I dive into defining defense mechanisms, I need to speak briefly about the theorists that developed defense mechanisms, and that would be the one and only very controversial Sigmund Freud. Honorable mention must be given to his daughter Anna Freud, who further expanded on her father's work on defenses. So, Sigmund Freud, he believed that our personality is made up of three elements, which is the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is our pleasure principle. It's all about our wants and our desires. So the id is like the red devil on our shoulder. Imagine it like that. Then we have the ego. The ego is the reality principle. Now, everyone's reality will be different because we have been exposed to different things. We have been socialized differently. The last one is the superego. The superego is the morality principle. Picture the superego as the white angel on your next shoulder. The superego wants you to do the right thing. What is the right thing? It's all dependent on what society deems acceptable. So, when someone is in conflict between their desires and what society expects of them, essentially what is happening is they're conflicted between their id and their superego. When this happens, anxiety arises within us. And when that anxiety becomes present, defense mechanisms are born. So it's important to note that defense mechanisms start developing from as early as childhood. And when we become overwhelmed, our ego must defend itself. And by doing so, it begins to distort whatever scenario is unfolding into something that is more acceptable in our view. So with that, we could define defense mechanisms as unconscious modifications made to certain situations by our psyche that protects us from anxiety.
Oh, very interesting. And I'm glad that you mentioned the devil and the angel kind of thing, right?
Yes, we've all been there.
We've
what
all
to
been
do?
there. Right, good. So that goes to my next question then. So, with that, are defense mechanisms good or are they bad?
They are both, because defense mechanisms can either be adaptive or pathological. So an example of an adaptive or a positive defense mechanism is sublimation. Sublimation is basically like changing our urges that may be socially unacceptable into something that is considered acceptable. For example, let's use David. David is 14 years old. He is in secondary school, and David is going through a lot of developmental changes. And he is very irritable when he's home. He doesn't want to talk to people sometimes, which is very relatable. We all remember that growing up. So what David does, anytime he starts to feel overwhelmed, he goes and he plays football. This is how it starts. It seems very innocent, but this is how it starts. Because when what is going on with David is he's using football as a release.
Right.
Now, if he becomes aware that he is using football as a means of regulating his nervous system, he will be able to identify what his triggers are, and gradually he can work to resolve in it. So in a case like this, sublimation is considered a positive defense mechanism because it contributes to psychological growth.
Right.
But on the other hand, we have pathological examples of defense mechanisms, and an example of that is denial. So denial is basically our inability to recognize the reality of a situation. Let's be real, we have all experienced denial. Example, let's use Marissa. Marissa is 17 years old and this is her first boyfriend. So one day Marissa's mom comes home and she says, Marissa, I saw your boyfriend with another young lady in the mall and they were looking like they were in an inappropriate position. What does Marissa do? Marissa immediately defends her boyfriend. She does not want to hear anything her mother says. She accuses her mother of making up the scenario. She says, you don't want me to be happy. She just don't want to hear her mother because listening to her mother and accepting what her mother said is too painful. So what does she do? She just deflects. It's easy to deny that situation than face the truth because the truth is painful. So this is where defense mechanisms become poisonous to our system. Because when it is we run from our problems or we pull our blankets over our problems, just because of our inability to confront these internal conflicts that we are experiencing, it disconnects us from reality.
Okay, all right. And I'm very glad that you gave those examples because myself and I'm sure some of our viewers, they could probably relate to some of those things.
Yes.
We were there at some point, right? All right, so moving on. So you gave two good examples, right? But tell us more examples of defense mechanisms. I'm sure there are other things involved.
There are many more examples. So I can give you a few. Let's start with repression. So repression, Anna Freud liked to call this motivated forgetting. Repression is all about pushing away painful memories from our conscious memory. So Sigmund Freud actually believed that repressed memories can show up in our dreams. So an example of repression is, consider a young child that was sexually abused and is unable to remember certain details in it. Another one is rationalization. Rationalization is all about making up acceptable excuses for something that is unacceptable.
Right.
So, example, let's have Michael. Michael knows he's in standard 1. Michael knows that he has a test on Friday, social studies exam, and Michael does not study or prepare in any form for that test.
Sounds familiar.
He goes to school, writes his exam and fails, and comes home and blames his teacher for his bad grade. Michael complains that the teacher did not give them enough time to write the exam. She did not cover that topic. A host of explanations Michael gives. So what Michael is doing is basically making up credible but very false justifications, all because he is unable to take accountability for his shortcomings.
It's like excuses, basically.
Yes, he's making up excuses.
Right. Okay.
Another one is projection. Projection is all about seeing our undesirable feelings, but in other people. Nice example. I'll use my daughter as the example. She is 8 years old, and one day she came home and she was very upset with her group of friends. She did not express this to them. She played it off cool. She was okay. She came home and she was like, Mommy, I don't want to be friends with them anymore. I don't like how they are behaving. I don't want to talk to them. Them just get me so angry today. And she complained about them. Okay, no problem. The next morning, when she woke up, she was like, Mommy, I wonder if my friends vex with me. Next thing, they don't want to play with me anymore.
Right.
Now, this was strange because she did not express any bad feelings towards them to their face, but this is how she felt. So now that time has passed, she felt guilty for what she said.
Oh, okay.
Right? And that is creating conflict now mentally. And how was that expressed in her? She thought they would feel that way about her when those feelings originally came from her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So another one is reaction formation. This is a nice one. Reaction formation is all about behaving a certain way that is opposite to how we are actually feeling. So
Alright.
imagine, this is common with young children. So imagine a boy likes a girl in class. He will, instead of being nice because he likes her, he might tease her and pull her hair and call her silly names and like just be very annoying.
That's what I was thinking.
Right? So he doesn't feel negatively towards her, but he's so conflicted here, he doesn't know what to do. So his ego steps in and be like, just act the opposite to what you really feel.
So it's an ego thing. Okay.
Right?
Wow.
So another one is displacement, and displacement is all about redirecting unfavorable feelings that could be brought about by like an authority figure onto someone else that is less threatening. So imagine that Sarah is in standard 5. She's preparing for SEA and she was embarrassed in class by her teacher one day.
Right.
And she felt ashamed, she felt angry, but she couldn't take out that rage on her teacher because her teacher is an authority figure. So when her mother picks her up later that day, Sarah slams the door. She has an attitude towards her mother. She doesn't want to talk to her sister. They did not do Sarah anything, but to Sarah, they are less threatening.
Right.
So it's easier for her to react and just let her feelings flow onto them instead of who originally brought about those feelings. And the last example of a defense mechanism I'll give is regression. And regression is all about like going back to a pattern from a previous developmental stage. Example, let's have Melanie. Melanie is 18 years old now. But when Melanie was little, she liked to look at television, put on her favorite DVDs, and she would just get lost looking at these DVDs.
Right.
And she would be like biting her nails when it's a suspense time, and it's just so soothing, this whole experience of looking at TV for however long in this little dream bubble. It's nice, it's comforting. When Melanie is now 18 and Melanie is faced with something that makes her a bit nervous or uncomfortable, so say she has an exam.
Right.
Awaiting the exam, Melanie starts to bite her fingers. Why? What is going on with Melanie? She's trying to self-soothe. She just unconsciously starts doing it because it soothes her. It is soothing her body,
Right.
her
Like a
mentally.
pacifier kind of thing.
Basically,
Mhm.
yeah. And that is, she's going back to a time that she did something when she was a lot younger.
Right.
Something that was comforting to her.
Right. Wow. So, on that one, it's like these things we grew up and just be told that these are habits you form, but clearly there's a lot more to that,
Yeah.
So, I mean, you put some really, really good examples, and I'm sure that it triggers for me and for probably for a lot of other people out there,
Yeah.
right? So, next question, a big one. Would you say it's important for us to recognize these defense mechanisms in ourselves or probably in other people?
It is very important
Right.
if we are able to recognize it in ourselves
Right.
and in others, because from these examples we understand they start developing from an early age.
Mhm.
And it starts off as it's protecting us emotionally, but
Mhm.
as we get older, our behaviors, the way we communicate, the way we think, it is shaped around these defense mechanisms. And these negative emotions that we grow up trying to suppress, they are stored some part in our body.
Right.
And they will show up in our lives as blockages within relationships, and blockages with being not able to communicate, and it will affect the quality of life that we are capable of having.
Okay. Wow. So, because these things, I mean, you mentioned something as relationships, and we all grow up and meet people, and sometimes we face with why people like this and why people like that. But sometimes these are just defense mechanisms that they are exercising. Okay.
Defense mechanisms that has become a normal part of their lives.
Right, right. Well, I mean, we went through so much tonight. I mean, thank you very much for myself, right? I've learned so much, and I'm sure there are many people in the audience here who enjoyed it, who learned a lot, and who really appreciate you coming out tonight and sharing with us these defense mechanisms. So, I hope that we bring you back on the show to talk about this some more, right? But I mean, our time is up, and yeah, we can only look forward to the next episode and the next time we have you here.
Thank you, it was my pleasure.
All right, thank you very much. So that's it for tonight's show, folks. And again, this is the Psych Lab. See you next time, and as always, stay psyched.